I purchased these divers thinking they were going to be much bigger. They're tiny, and I've never painted miniatures before, so this is definitely going to be a challenge. Originally, I just wanted to use this little whale shark, which is the perfect scale for these divers. But then I had a darker idea. I'm going to create a scene where these divers are hoping for a close encounter with the whale shark, but they get a lot more than they bargain for. To create the cliff, I'm using XPS foam. I needed to double it up to match the thickness of my hexagon mould, so I glued it together with some foam-friendly super glue and weighed it down. I sketched out a plan. I wanted rock flush at the front and something a bit wider in the distance. Originally, the plan was to have the divers peacefully swimming with the whale shark, totally unaware of what was lurking beneath. But as you'll see, the plan had to change. Once I started sculpting the octopus, it ended up being massive in comparison. There was just no way these divers wouldn't notice a giant sea monster right next to them. This is only my second time using a hot wire cutter, so I'm still learning. I sliced a corner off my hexagon to make things easier to get to, but the glue hadn't dried properly yet. I continued to sculpt the cliff face anyway. To make the cave, the only way I could think to do it was pulling out chunks of foam out with the pliers. I marked out the depth of my mould to work out where to sculpt the surface. Then I changed the hot wire to a pointy tool and just tried to smooth things off a bit. For the texture, I broke out the Sculptamold. This will be the first time I've ever used it, and I was surprised at the consistency. It's quite light and fluffy. Once that was dry, I coated the rock face with some gesso and then watered down some black acrylic to cover the whole surface. I chose 3 colours, Van Dyke Brown, Raw Sienna and Neutral Grey, and painted the surface of the rock going from dark to light, combining the colours as I went. So I picked up this Vallejo wash. I got a black and a sepia, but I'm going to try the sepia and just cover the whole rock face with it and use a paper towel to remove the excess and see how that looks. Next up is to paint the divers, which I needed something to support them. I got some toothpicks out and put them in some cork, cut the ends off and added a little blue tack. This should be about the right size for the divers. I covered them with black and then I got out this appropriately named paint called Scuba Diver. Thought that would be perfect for their wetsuits. I gave them both a bit of a different colour in their accessories, using green for one and orange for the other. Now I've got these acrylic paint pens. These are skin tone. They came in a pack and I don't need very much. I got some of the paint out and used the paintbrush to add the fine details. Then I finished off the equipment with a little silver. Today's going to be my first go at using polymer clay. I'll be using Super Sculpey and I'll be using this wire for an armature to create the creature. When measuring the tentacles, the plan started to change. This creature was going to be much bigger than I first envisioned. I thought 6 tentacles would take up plenty of space, and so I'd have the other 2 tucked away, still in the cave, as the creature was on its way out to investigate the scene above. I tried multiple times making the tentacles. I kept making them too thick. But then I finally settled on a size. Getting them onto the armature proved to be more difficult than I expected. I made a tool out of the polymer clay, filled it with holes, and I used that to create a texture on the surface. Time for the suckers, and there was a lot. I created a heap of little balls and applied them individually, pressing them on with a tool with a ball on the end. I used some spoons to support the piece before putting it into the oven. Unfortunately, one of the tentacles snapped, so I mended it with a little glue and some more clay. Well, it's just come out of the oven and it's broken again. I guess the glue wasn't a good idea in the oven, so I mended it best I could, and this time, instead of putting it in the oven this way, I'll turn it over and try this way. Then it has no way of breaking off. After finishing the creature, I painted it with some watered down gesso for a base coat, and then it was time to get out the airbrush, which had me a little nervous. I covered the whole thing in black to get in some practice. And then followed that up with some white highlights. I wanted a reddish purple colour palette, so I started with the darker red, then added a rose, and added some light purple on the sucker side. I used a bit of brushwork to add some orange on the body and some white onto the suckers. I'll be using Let's Resin's deep pour resin and adding a little turquoise blue. I started with a thin layer to coat my cliffside and the creature to seal them in. Not sure if it's going to work, but last time the heat from the resin curing made the paint blister, and I had air bubbles coming up from my timber. I'm just having a look here. I don't know if you can see. Unfortunately, I can already see that I have the sepia colour running into my resin. I tried mixing it into the resin, but then decided tipping it out would be best. I tried propping it up so the excess resin would sink to the bottom, adding a bit of darker blue to the bottom. Then realised that this was a bad idea, as I needed the whole of the background covered to avoid a line through the background. I took the creature out and left it to the side to dry. Hopefully it was covered enough to seal it, as the paint had started running from this as well. I was pretty happy with the dried results so far. I wanted to use the nylon thread to suspend my characters in the scene, but realised I'd be chopping that off at the surface, which would look bad. So I decided to try some clear rods and attach them to the resin at the back using UV resin. I didn't mix quite enough resin for the first pour, so I made up some more, just a little lighter in colour this time. I thought I'd pour this at the top. Unfortunately, this caused some streakiness, so I'm not sure if I mixed it properly. I decided to tip it all out again, mix it together and start over. I was getting in quite a mess at this point. I ended up with a couple of large areas of bubbles, so I thought I'd try my hand at the Dremel and grind down the raised areas. Got a couple of attachments I could try and need to be careful not to hit the rock as that's painted. I'll then give it a thin coat of resin, which if I'd thought about that at the start, I could have used a nylon thread. I'll have to remember that for next time. I tried the other attachment, but I wasn't a fan. I mixed up a small amount of clear resin, which I'll use a torch to get the bubbles out. The tape that I used on the low side is heat resistant, but I was still careful with the torch. I cleaned up my edges and it was done. And here is the final result. The divers came for an experience of a lifetime, to swim with the whale sharks, but they soon realised there was more than whale sharks down there. It was a bit of a struggle with the clay and the resin, but the idea behind this was to learn, and I certainly did that. Would you go swimming with whale sharks? If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see me create more dioramas. See you in the next one. Bye.